Hello and welcome to Off the Fence, where we deconstruct difficult decisions so we can discover what keeps us stuck and, more importantly, how do we get unstuck so that we can make even difficult decisions with confidence. I'm your host, Karen Covey. I'm a divorce and decision coach, as well as a recovering lawyer, mediator, arbitrator, collaborative divorce professional, and author. And joining me here today is my guest, Hirsch Serman. And I'm going to read this because this man has so many credentials and letters after his name. I want to make sure to get it right. So Hirsch is an MBA, a CPA, and a CDFA, and he specializes in the financial and tax aspects of divorce. His values-based approach is to prioritize, organize, and simplify your financial life during and beyond the divorce process. Hirsch is committed to helping each client understand the more complex tax and financial implications of his or her specific situation. As a certified divorce financial analyst and a certified public accountant and a trained mediator, Hirsch is uniquely equipped to recognize and creatively work through financial complexities, tax ramifications, and inequities in the settlement process that are often overlooked. Hirsch, thank you for joining me today.
You've set the bar pretty high. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well,
Pleasure
I
being here.
didn't set the bar high. This is just who you are. And I'm so thrilled to have you here on the show. And I'd like to start by jumping into something that is what I'm going to call your tagline. I don't know if that's really what it is or not, but you talk about prioritize, organize, and simplify your financial life. How do you help clients to do that? And what does that mean to you?
To me, it really means identifying your values and wanting to live a values-based life, and then creating an approach in how to do that. So the priorities are really, what are your values? What's important to you? I think, especially when somebody's going through a divorce, that the first thing they need to do is actually step backwards, not forward. There's so many things they need to think about. Like, they've probably forgotten who they are, or very possibly. They've been through, this 20 years, or sometimes we see 30, 35 years worth of marriage, people getting divorces. They don't even remember who they are. They don't remember what they want out of life. They've been putting so much effort into maybe saving their marriage. All of these things play in to where they are now, but they need to start looking forward and in a very different way. So learn again what brings you joy. Very possibly they've lost a lot of these things, or maybe even all of these things. And a very big one, obviously, from my side is understand who you are financially. And so those are all the priorities. What are the things you want in your life? From the financial side of it, and a lot of the pieces that don't seem like they're financial obviously have a financial impact because they may cost money, or we've got a plan for them. So the first part is really that prioritize. What are those values? How do I want to live my life? The organize is getting educated and putting a little bit of a system around that. And so I do things differently in some of the ways. I don't do a budget in the regular way. I do what I call a divorce budget, which I've created, which I think helps you a little bit with the strategy of divorce. And then ultimately, being able to simplify it is putting it into that system, being able to work it in a way that works for you, that becomes more simple. A lot of people they find their finances daunting. They've never done it before. They are not sure what to expect, what's going to change. And all of that's normal. All of that's natural. We have a fear of the unknown very often. It really becomes following this approach, and it's not rigid in the way you have to do it my way. It's really around you, because this is going to be your life. But being able to do that, identify your priorities and your values. Let's organize around them, get you educated where you need to be, or find the resources that you need, and then get a system for you to work it through. It becomes a much easier way for people to live their life and also go through a divorce and set up their life beyond divorce.
Okay, I love this. There is so much here to unpack. This is just, I think it's brilliant. And what's really unique about you and about this conversation is that I've talked to a lot of divorce professionals. I don't hear a lot of people talking about values and divorce necessarily in the same sentence, right? We
I
all
agree.
think of, yeah, we think of divorce as something where you kind of go through this temporary insanity, whatever kind of behavior that exhibits in you or your spouse. It is what it is. It's all okay. It's part of divorce. But a values-based approach to divorce sounds so much more fulfilling. It sounds like it could make meaning out of the chaos, So
I
speak
think
more to
there's a
that.
lot to that, what you're saying. You know this, I know this. When you go through a divorce, your income generally is not going to change. However, you want all the things that you had in your life, but there are two families or two houses that have to be, you know, financed through the same income, basically. And so we can't always get everything we want. And that's where identifying your values becomes so important. There's a lot of things we do in life that don't bring us that much joy. There's a lot of things we do in life that do bring us joy. Let's focus on the items that are going to bring us joy, and let's create a life around that, as opposed to, I want everything I've ever had. It's unrealistic is number one. And number two, most people going through a divorce, there are things that they don't want in their life that they've had before. So let's really focus on you, on where your life's going to go. And again, the things that bring you joy ultimately are the things, and, joy can be also, I think, security of the future brings people happiness, being able to know they're going to be secure. These are the things that I try to focus on and help them focus on.
Yeah, that's so true, because it's hard to feel joy and feel happiness when you're worried about how are you going to pay the mortgage next week,
Right.
or how are you going to send your kids to daycare, or whatever the expense is. So I think you're right. These are all intertwined together, but you work with people at some of the most difficult times in their life, one of the most difficult times in their life. How do you help them navigate that? How do you help them make those values-based decisions rather than just, going through the process and getting through it however they can and hoping for the best?
The first piece I said is a little bit of stepping back and really identifying. I have a worksheet and a session that I do with people, and it's all around your values and it's your priorities and it's you, your kids, the finances. These are the kind of things that we're going to run through. And there are items, so to speak, on the page that I've put down, but they're really intended to really be a catalyst in getting the discussion started, as opposed to being everything that we need to discuss, because everyone's divorce is a very personal event in their life. So we start there. The second part to that is then we run through column 2, which is your spouse's priorities on the same thing. And I think this is a piece that is missing in so many people's approach to doing divorce when they go through a divorce. And it identifies a few things. One is it identifies potentially where a lot of those very difficult discussions are going to be, because you both want the same thing. We both want the house. The house is the classic one. Let's just say that's it. There's going to be a hard discussion around that as to who gets the house. The alternative is now we can look at all the things that I don't really want, that maybe the spouse does, that I can give up towards getting that. Well, that's going to be a much stronger negotiation and selling of the idea than if you just walk in there and it's all emotional. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is, as I go through it, I'm understanding a little bit more of what is makes that person tick. Let's put it that way. I've even had a situation, or a few situations, it's happened quite a few times, where we run through some of these things and then we get to the spouses. And now when we're having those discussions, we start to create the beginning of our strategy. I'll give you one example. I think I've probably shared this with you over the years, but we're running through the spouse, we get to debt. And the wife who I'm working with says, oh, he is terrified of debt. I'm like, tell me more about this, right? This could be something we can use. Well, when he was a kid, his parents declared bankruptcy. They ate in food kitchens, and he said it was just like a miserable way to go through high school. All your friends are doing things you can't, all the rest, right? So I said, okay, well, let's look at your debt. They had actually about $35,000 in debt, 20+% on the credit cards. So I said, well, you've got plenty of assets to pay this off. We're not going to mention that part. We're going to say, if you give me 2 years worth of interest, because you've been carrying it for more than 2 years, then we'll take all the debt. Well, when you look at about 45% of that money, that's a windfall because you had to pay 50% anyway. You've only really taken on 5% more debt. But the goodwill and everything else that came with that and what they did, was amazing. And so they were able to use that in other areas as well to be able to really get things, because it wasn't a one and done. It was, I'll do this if, I'll take the debt if you give me this kind of thing. So there was a play with it. And so they got quite a bit more by using this strategy. So that was number one, the values, the priorities, understanding yours, understanding your spouse's, and what comes with that. Then we set up the divorce, what I call the divorce budget, which I've created. Most people are, how much do I earn? How much do I spend? You can like put a quick prayer in. Hopefully there's something at the bottom line. And the statistic, by the way, that I see, about 70% of households don't have a budget. So this is unique and new for most people. So the way I do a budget is I say, I don't want to know your income up front. I only want to know your essential spend. And we look at that and we try to place that essential spend as close as we can into post-divorce living. So what would your housing look like, especially if you're not keeping the marital home? Those kind of changes are taken into account.
Okay, I need to interrupt for a second. What do you define as essential spend?
Great question. So essential spend are the things you have to get through the month. I need food. I need a place over my head. What you would almost look at Maslow's lowest piece of the hierarchy, right? The safety, the home. I need to have a car probably to get to work. The very basics like that I have to get through the month. Okay. Then after we understand your essential spend, and by the way, cable is not essential, internet is, just to give you an example there. We could not be speaking like this if we didn't have internet. I know you and I do a lot of our work over the internet. Having a cable package for $350 is not necessarily an essential spend. That is a want. That is a non-essential or discretionary spend. And that's the second piece of it. We look at the discretionary spend that's in your life. And firstly, it brings a tremendous amount of awareness of now how I'm spending my money, which is very important. The second piece to that is you now need to make decisions. Are you going to scale back on something? Are you absolutely need that in your life, even though it's discretionary? Or maybe I've had people that say, I'm going to cut it out. I actually had a gentleman, it was about an $8 or $9 million estate. They were very wealthy, and he was a big woodworker. And he says, Hirsch, I'm going through this. I'm looking, I spend over $180 a month in these gorgeous woodworking periodicals. They're the most gorgeous pictures, step by step. He said, I haven't looked at them in a year. I go to the internet, I get on YouTube, I hit play, I look, I hit pause, and I go and do it. He just saved himself about $2,200 in one little item like that.
It sounds
Those
like,
are the kind of things that we're going to do.
Yeah, it sounds like that ties back to your original point, which is values and priorities.
Absolutely.
And what I love about this is that you're marrying those two together in a way that it's like you're looking at what are your values and what are your priorities to create a new life, right? It's not just about looking at a budget. It's about saying, how do I want to live my life going forward? So in a way, this is, in a very strange way, kind of an opportunity, right? To recategorize things.
Absolutely, a huge opportunity. And if you think about what we've spoken through, you actually have a real solid framework of your strategy. You've got your values, you know what you want to keep more of, you know your top line where you want to start on your negotiation, and you know what you can't go below. Now you're pushing for somewhere in the middle to upper half of that, obviously, but it really is the outline and the infrastructure of your financial strategy.
But that is brilliant, because that's something people I don't think they fully appreciate. And, they know conceptually, yes, I need a strategy to negotiate, but they assume that their lawyer will have that strategy for them and will know that.
Correct.
But that's not, as we both know, that is not always the case. And the lawyer, to a certain extent, I mean, they're not going to know what makes your spouse tick. They're not going to know what his or her priorities are. They'll be lucky if they remember to ask you what your priorities are, right? So the fact that you're doing the work and putting yourself in the driver's seat and creating this strategy is, I think, brilliant.
I appreciate that. I find the feedback I get from working this way with clients is tremendous. And I want to point out, a lot of people, especially when you are so emotional, they're not always sure what their priorities are. And sometimes they identify things and they change. And they think, how do my values change? That also is natural, because we kind of, if we do the right work, I should start with that, and we really do the introspection and speak to the right people, we start to unearth. It's like, as I say, peeling away the layers of the onion. We really do unearth a lot of pieces that were missing in our life, that we either gave up or we compromised on, or now we're discovering again, like, oh, I forgot that's an important piece of my life because I haven't done it in 10 years.
Yeah.
So
And it's a beautiful, so divorce, I mean, there's not a lot of good that can be said about it on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you can reframe it, and like you said, use this as an opportunity to reprioritize your life, it can be awesome. And I really like your idea of using values to make decisions about how do you settle your divorce case? What matters to you? What do you need? What do you not need? I go through a similar exercise with my clients, straight out of the gate, because by making values-based decisions, you have a much better chance of ending up at the end of your divorce in a place you really want to be, instead of wherever you ended up, right?
right.
So it sounds
I
like
think
that's
the
what
other
you help
piece
your
to it is,
clients do.
it very much. And the other piece to it is, it's so easy to go down a million rabbit holes because there are so many distractions or so many things that are happening during a divorce. It keeps you quite focused in where you need to have those discussions. And if these are not your priorities, there's no need to spend a tremendous amount of time or effort or exploring those areas, because they're not going to be part of your life later if you've identified them as non, you only want your values as part of your life. And so it really does help you direct the conversations and keep a lot more focused than you may be when you're under stress, emotional, scared, and everything else. That really can derail a lot of the discussion.
That's so much of a key as well, because divorce, let's be honest, it's overwhelming. It affects so many areas of your life, and there's so many balls that you feel like you've got to keep juggling while you're going through a divorce. To not let yourself go down a rabbit hole that you don't need to go down is huge, because you've already got a lot of other things to do and to worry about and to think about, and not chasing your tail. Really, it seems like it goes back to that point that you made about focus. It helps keep you focused on what matters, focused on your values, so that you can make better decisions as you go through the process, right?
Absolutely. I think the other piece, I'm sure you've heard this, is I've had clients who will come to me in the middle of the process and go, I have no idea how we got to this point. And you're saying, tell me more. And really, it's because they were, going blind in many ways. They really didn't have a focus. They were speaking about the normal things, but they weren't really focusing on them and their life beyond divorce. And so they were talking things. They were not talking values and life. And that's a big difference.
I think that's a huge difference in the way you work with people and approach divorce, as opposed to some other people who I've talked to who just, it's like you're waiting for the next thing. For example, with lawyers, there is a very defined legal process that every divorcing person is going to have to go through. And there are certain steps that you have to get through to get from point A to point done, right? And
Right.
that's all fine. However, um, you can get through all of those steps without ever taking the time to create a strategy for how you want to do it. People go through it without having a plan or a strategy, and they wonder at the end, as to your point, how did I get here? Right.
Right.
And
Right.
it's so important to do the work, to do the preparation, to do the planning, um, that it requires to get to the place you want to be, instead of, well, yeah, I don't know how I ended up here, but here I am, right? And
Right.
and I think that your own personal journey with divorce probably helped inform how you created this approach. I mean, or maybe I'm misspeaking. How did your personal journey like work its way into the things you do now?
Right. So I've been a finance guy my whole career. I've been a CPA over 20 years. And I went through a little over 10 years ago, I went through three life cycles that were major life cycles that all happened in about 20 months. Running through them very quick was my mom and dad were on vacation. My dad walked out of the bedroom where they were staying. He had a heart attack and he passed away. And my mom had literally never paid a bill in her life. And she was so lost and paid some twice, didn't pay others. What's this direct? They taking stuff out of my bank account? Like she had no idea. And as the dust was settling on that, and I should just a quick shout out to my brother. He took over her finances, and I can't even imagine the stress my mom was feeling every time she had to pick up a checkbook. I went through my divorce shortly after that, and everyone was speaking finances and kids. And at the end of my divorce, we were looking at putting my mom into assisted living. And I realized, which by the way is a whole financial adventure of its own, and I actually work with people helping them there a little bit, but my focus is really divorce. And it's so interesting to me because we teach our kids, how to change a tire, how to cook a meal, how to do our laundry. We don't teach our kids, or we don't have the schools teach our kids how to manage their daily finances. And I think these three major life cycles, all in such a short period of time, was such a light bulb. And during my divorce, I was working with people, helping them. And I was like, wow, there is such a need for this.
Yeah.
And that really was what it was. And I'll tell you, it's funny because I have a radio show, I've got an MBA, I've got a CPA, I've got a CDFA, I've been doing this for 10 years, I've got all the rest that comes with it. And yet I tell people I've been through a divorce and all of a sudden I've got street creds. All
Yeah,
of the
you
other stuff does not matter. It's all of a sudden, oh, you know what I'm talking about. So,
100%. But you know what you said is so interesting. And I think I could ask the question, but I think I'm getting a little bit of insight into why your company is called Life Cycle Financial.
exactly
Um,
why.
but that's a good point. It's not just about divorce. That's the area that you tend to focus on. But to your point about your mom, I mean, a death of a spouse when you've never paid a bill is terrifying. You're going through many of the same things and you still
Right.
don't understand personal finance. So, the ability to make I mean, we're not even up to make financial decisions. It's
No,
just, how do you pay the bills, right?
right.
And people don't think about that, but even at a very, very basic level, you've got money coming in every month and you've got to pay the bills, going out every month. You have to decide, well, what gets paid, when it gets paid, if there's not enough money at the end of the month, what doesn't get paid. And you're making really important financial decisions with, as you mentioned, most people, they have no background in that. They have no training in that. How are people supposed to learn this stuff?
So I'll tell you exactly what you're saying resonated with me so early on in when I was working with people that I actually created a program called Who Am I Financially? And it is because of exactly what you said. People are really in many ways clueless. And I don't mean that insultingly. They have, when you're married, you kind of divide and conquer. I'll take the finances, you take whatever it might be. And so we don't look at the ex-spouse and say, well, he doesn't know, she doesn't know how to cook. That's never an issue. Oh, but the finances, we tend to harp on. Now, admittedly, you're not going to be able to cook anything if you don't have money in the bank account because you can't buy the food. But the idea behind the program was really, it's 4 modules. You can do one, you can do all 4, but number 1 is the budget that we spoke about. And whether you're getting divorced, whether you've lost a loved one, it doesn't really matter. Having a budget is an important thing. Much easier to spend money than earn money. So we should understand where that money is going. That's number 1. Number 2 is your net worth. We don't really have a full sense, or especially if we've never been doing the finances. We'll say, oh, my house is worth, $750,000. Okay, it's worth $750,000, but you owe $500,000. So it's not really a $750,000 house for you. But understanding that net worth, what is liquid, like in a bank account versus tied up in your home, or maybe in a retirement account. What's the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA? And they're very big differences potentially, especially with the tax impact. So that's another piece, is really understanding your net worth. I have a bill paying module, and part of it, like you were saying, how do you prioritize, or what are the priorities in your bills? And then the last one is, if you have debt, working with you and helping you eliminate debt.
That sounds brilliant. And it's there is such a need for that, I think, because until you understand all of that, you can't. People talk about, I want to be financially free, right? Well, you can't be financially free if you don't first understand how money works and then make it work for you. So it sounds like this would be something not just for people who are dealing with a major life cycle change, but pretty much for anyone, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's definitely something anyone could work with. It's funny you say that, actually, because I have a client who was getting divorced. She was 63. Her daughter was 38 years old, and her daughter, she referred her daughter to me because she knew her daughter didn't understand how to manage her finances, and her daughter had just inherited $50,000, and she was so proud to tell me, you know what, I have put that $50,000 in a 4.5% CD, which 4.5% a year ago was a solid rate of return.
Yeah.
But when she told me she had about $30,000 in credit card debt, she didn't understand. She was paying about 21% on the credit cards. So that 50,000, or really the 30,000 she could have used to pay off the credit cards, was actually costing her 15%, the difference in what she pays, what she earns, a little bit more than that, as opposed to the idea of, I'm earning 4.5%. So she was excited that she had made a good decision on the interest rate. Unfortunately, in the larger picture, it was not necessarily the right move, and she could have saved herself a tremendous amount of interest. When you're paying 21%, that's for the year. It's about $6,000 that she was paying in interest alone.
Yeah, that is a big deal. And it's, to your point, it's about looking at the big picture, looking at everything that's going on in your life, whether that you're talking about personal finance, whether you're talking about divorce, whether you're talking about dealing with a death. It's like, if you look at anything with blinders on, you're not as likely to make the best decision overall. It may be the best decision in the vacuum, but in the bigger picture, maybe not so much. So Hirsch, this is fascinating. I mean, there's so many aspects of decision making and finance, and that are so helpful for so many people. I could talk to you forever, but I know we are on a limited time schedule here. So I want to wrap it up, but I want to ask you one question, and I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot, but I'd love to ask you're laughing at me now. I like to ask this of all of my guests. So what is one of the most difficult personal decisions that you've had to make over the course of your lifetime? And how'd you do it?
The first thing I can say, this is good payback, because I'm sure when you've been on my radio show, I've put you on the spot. So don't feel bad about it. I think the biggest one was after or during my divorce, really taking an entirely a huge step back and saying, do I want to take my business in a very different direction. You know, I was in my mid-40s. I was doing small business consulting to people who were doing fantastically well, but had no idea how to actually run a business. They just happened to do very, very well. And I helped them learn how to run a business. And I was now going from that level to working with individuals going through extremely vulnerable life cycles. And I think that is probably, at least in the last 20 years, the hardest or largest decision that I've really had to make. And I think it's the best decision I've made because I absolutely love what I do. I don't think I'm that typical cold, heartless MBA, CPA, CDFA. I do come with some compassion, but I love being able to wake up and take people who are in vulnerable situations and difficult situations and help really give them insights that are going to help them and not just during the next 6 months or a year during the divorce, but way beyond.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is so key. And that's a whole nother area. I'll have to have you back on the podcast later that we can talk about, which is making decisions when you're in such a vulnerable state, when you're not, you're full of emotions and you can't perhaps think as clearly as you'd like to think. That's a whole nother topic, but we will get to that. Right now, why don't you tell people where's the best place that they can find you?
The best place to find me is probably through my website. It is the name of the company, lifecycle.financial. There's no .com, .net at the end. It's just lifecycle.financial, like the company.
That is awesome. Again, Hirsch, thank you so much. This has been such an instructive and helpful conversation. And for all of our listeners, if you like what you're hearing, please hit the like buttons, hit the subscribe button, and we'll talk with you again the next time. Bye for now. Thank you, Hirsch.
Thank you so much. This has been great.